right, thank you. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for being here. Your participation in the conference is like the livelihood of HEDNA, so really appreciate that. It's not without some anxiety, I think, for some of us to actually go out and start traveling again and showing up at a conference. Personally, this is probably the first time I've had long pants on in the last 6 months. And second, the things I want to go over today, I'm not trying to portray myself as a subject matter expert. What I want to do is try to lay out some of the things that I'm looking at as a product manager for our distribution solutions, kind of lay out some of the pitfalls or the speed bumps, as we call them, so that you can get an idea of some of the things that I'm thinking about, and maybe that's some of the things that you're going to see as well as we go through the planning for the next, the next year and a half. One of the common things that I've heard is we're expected to do a lot more with a lot less. So hopefully this may help with some of that planning and trying to get in front of some of this stuff. So what's lurking out there? Tax reform. One of the things that we're starting to see is a lot of governments are going after that tax on the margin in the old net rate model. So as the net rates are being distributed, the guest pays the full retail value. The hotel only collects the net rate. And so they're only paying taxes to their local cities or government on that rate that they collect from the merchant. So they're getting smart, and there's a lot of litigation that's gone on, and we're starting to see tax reform in different regions in the world that are actually changing the way that we're going to have to do business in this merchant model. So will the merchant model go away as a result of this? Are we going to sell the rate, the sales rate only, and try to do away with the merchant model and have this hybrid commissions model? Some of the things that I'm thinking about as we go through this change, and we've seen it in different regions. There's pending lawsuits in Anaheim, so I think it's just a matter of time when we see that it's going to be widely adopted, and so we're going to end up having to change the way that we do business with some of our partners. But like I said, I'm no expert on it, but that's kind of the way that I'm seeing it develop. The next piece of legislation, I guess, or litigation that's happening is around mandatory fees. So we're being asked as hoteliers to include any mandatory fee in the daily rate structure. So as on our websites, probably November, December timeframe, we'll start including any mandatory fees in the average daily rate. And so it will be the average, it'll look like the average daily rates are higher as a result of including these mandatory fees. There's a lot of questions on, well, how is that going to impact the OTA space? How is that going to impact the meta space? Some of the OTAs are already doing this in some ways. Are the hoteliers going to be doing it in the same ways? Is the marketplace still going to be competitive? We don't know. It's still in development. But we're on our way to implement some of these changes and making sure that our APIs can support any fees that we may or may not add. PSD2, this is a moving target for sure. I think the original due date for trying to implement PSD2 was I think it was at the beginning of last year. We've gotten some reprieve, but the date keeps slipping. I think there was I think American Express had announced that they needed to, all transactions in Europe were going to be two-factor authentication starting in October. The UK has different guidelines around it and when they're going to request it. The problem here is not necessarily PSD2 and being compatible for it, it's adoption. We've got it built into the APIs. We can send the two-factor authentication tokens to the properties. They can process for no-shows or late cancels. Problem is nobody's sending them in yet. So it's like, there's this adoption, or a lack of adoption, I guess, that we're waiting for. And so some of the feedback that we've gotten from some of our partners is though, you know, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We want you just to use a virtual credit card to guarantee the room, but when the guest comes on site, then you use their physical card. Only use the virtual card if it's a no-show or late cancel. That's great and all, but you have to call them to turn on the money, the funds on the card. So it's a whole new process for the hotels to follow. So we're kind of, hey, wait a minute. Go back to just sending us the tokens. We've coded for it. It's existing. Just send it to us, then we'll process if needed. So that's a kind of a moving target because the dates have all slipped and the adoption's not quite what we think it is. But the other thing I wanted to mention about PSD2 is that if we go back to the whole tax reform, and if we start pushing partners to retail models as a result of making sure all the taxes are collected, then we introduce another problem, is that they all have to be PSD2 compliant if they're selling in Europe. So, or it's a hybrid model, and that PSD2 wouldn't be an issue for, at least for on the hotel side. So just something to think about. I think the other thing that we seem to get caught up in a lot is when our revenue management team is wanting to make an enhancement. As we get more granular in the revenue management practices, we see more change. More change equals more transactions to keep everything in sync. And so we're actually getting back to some of the old practices that we were finally able to move away from around distribution costs and transaction volumes. We're starting to see it again and trying to manage it again, but it's not coming from shoppers, it's coming from us making so much changes to our inventory and as a result of revenue management practices. So now we're getting into this habit of having to do a ROI and calculate any kind of transaction costs or AWS fees as a result of changes into the revenue management system. And we're seeing this more and more often. The other thing that's kind of looming on the horizon, I know we talked a lot about it, is this attribute-based selling and shopping. There's a few different aspects to it that have me concerned, I guess. One is that, well, you talk to different people and it's all over the place, from simple add-ons to, hey, we're going to redo inventory, we're not even going to have room types anymore. So I don't know that we'll ever get to that point, but for me, I guess, it's how do you get started and what do we need to do in the near future to be ready for it? And it goes around to some of the things that we were talking about earlier around content. Structured content's what's going to make attribute-based selling and shopping working. The other thing that I've been thinking about as it relates to attribute-based shopping or selling is how do you distribute that? Do we really need to change our data structure or change our APIs to accommodate this? Or is it some other backwards compatible? Do we still maintain our room types within our systems to distribute, but on our points of sale, on the direct channel sales, that's where you break everything apart and you use your attribute-based pricing or selling shopping models and maintain some of that structure that we have today. It would probably be improved over what we do today as a result of adding more and more content. But so that's really the kind of the thought around it, is how do we even get started, and you know, what does the future of that look like with our third parties? You know, that's the open question, is what does it look like? So as we go through some of these issues, this is really what the pillars are designed to work on. So if you want to get more involved with some of these topics, let the pillar owners know. That's kind of what we're here to try to work out. And then if there's any other items that may be troubling you, or that you see that the industry needs to take action with, please let us know through the pillar groups and the different work groups, and we'll get them added to the tasks, I guess. That's what I had to share today. So again, I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you.